we split it into two crews, basically. The foreman was Al Hammond, and he jumped with the first four at the dam. Al Hammond and Dick Tracy, the squad leader. And then Roland Anderson and I and two others went down and they dropped us on the lower spot was selected.
What'd you find when you got there?
Well,
what were the spots like? Was there a tree landing?
Well, it was, like I say, it was the ceiling was probably 1,000 to 1,200 feet, and it was raining and pretty bumpy. And the biggest hazard that I didn't know about at the time was that there was a lot of little airplanes started to show up, just sightseers and everything else. And it was a fairly narrow canyon, and Cookie Calloway was the captain on the DC-2, and he was cussing. You could hear him cussing over the radio about all these dang airplanes that were flying around. But we went ahead and made the drop. And
did you do it all in one stick, or
no? We dropped two-man sticks on both spots. And when I got out, we jumped at a fairly low altitude. I would guess about 1,000 feet from today's standard, maybe a little bit lower. We wasn't in the air very long, and I was going backward a lot faster than I wanted to. And I basically hit the spot, but it wasn't much of a spot, and I let a big pile of willow brush. And kind of ironically, one of the people who were supposed to be helping run up to me and see if I was okay. Are you okay? Are you okay? And I thought that was kind of ironic. So anyway, we did what we could, and then we got the word that the quake may have damaged the Hebgen Dam, and that we should evacuate those people as far as up the hill as possible. Well, some of them were hurt. There were a couple fatalities, and there was a nurse there on the ground, and that really did the heavy first aid initial first aid stuff. But those people didn't want to move that far, and a lot of them were not able to move very far up the hill. We finally got them up to a point there where we figured we could use a heliport up the hill, and I wouldn't say that would be more than 100 yards, 150 maximum from the river, up from the road from there. And we did what we could for them, and then I don't know, about noon or something like that, they started getting helicopters coming in there. The private helicopters and the guard and everything else, and they started evacuating the most seriously injured people. And so from then on, from the rest of the day and the following day, what the jumpers did was go back to the lake. We went and spent the night in West Yellowstone when they finally got the road open, just about dark. And we went back the next day and in boats and went up all the creeks where they're off the road that they could drive, and looked for survivors and trailers and stuff that hadn't moved or anything else, and tried to get the license plates off. First we looked for survivors or remains in those vehicles and those things, and anybody else that might be wandering around. And we tried to get all the license plates we could off that sun for identification. That was about the only way, because the water was coming up very fast. And I'm sure that a lot of those vehicles and those trailers are still under that water in that lake in there. Because anyway, the biggest, I guess, the most nervous I was when I heard about that dam being cracking, because we're still down there fooling around and we're looking up at that dam. And if that dam would have broken, it would have been bad news.
Did you find survivors?
We found a couple, the other guys did, found a couple that were kind of, tried to stay with their vehicles as far as they could, and they missed the evacuation. But we didn't have time to really do searching the first day. And some of them wandered up to the spot, and some of them we found down there sitting in the brush. Some of them were not seriously injured, but they'd been struck by trees or something like that. So.
Yeah. Find people in shock?
Yeah, we did. And we did the best we could to get them up to where they could be evacuated by helicopter. And as I said, they had opened the road, but it wasn't much of a road. It was a long drive on that road back to the hospital in West Yellowstone where they were taking them.
So you stayed overnight one night in West Yellowstone, worked the second day, and then you were out of there?
Then we came out of there in the evening of the second day, and the following morning, they evacuated, they picked up all the jumpers at the West Yellowstone Airport. It was the old little dirt airport with a jump base on it. And the only person that stayed behind was the foreman, Al Hammond, who was kept there to kind of explain what was going on to all the officialdom that was coming in and answered questions. And the rest of us went back, and I think a couple days later, most of us were on another fire.
So has anybody ever asked you guys what you did on that fire?
Oh yeah.
On that rescue jump?
We all got, the following spring, we all got what's better here, it's a unit award for superior service from the Department of Agriculture for the jumpers that jumped on the fire. And then, really, up until about 94, I think it was, they never really had any reunion of those people. And then we had a little one there in 94, but then I think that I may be wrong in that year, but then in 09, the Gallatin Visitor Center there at the Quake Lake area put together a kind of a reunion and got, I think, all but one or two of the jumpers and the guys that run that thing into this reunion. We all were interviewed, and they took us on a tour and all that sort of
So the Forest Service interviewed you guys?
Right.
Did they have any of the survivors come to that?
Any survivors?
Yeah.
Yes, quite a few. And I think it's in this paperwork somewhere,
Yeah.
but I didn't go through it.
Yeah. So you went back, they flew you back to the base in Missoula.
Yes.
So you just went back to firefighting, scattered around.
Yeah.
So after that, you had a couple more years. You had 3 more years.
Yeah, my last year was the 61.
1961. So you were a pilot too, weren't you?
Yeah, I used my GI Bill when I got out of the Marines and got my private and commercial there in Missoula on the GI Bill while I was working on the year-round. I was on year-round employment status with the Forest Service from the spring of 1956 until I left them in 61. So when I was going to school that first year, college, and then later on when I was jumping in the wintertime, packing chutes and repairing equipment and stuff like that, I took my additional training and ended up getting my commercial pilot's license. So when I went to work for Intermountain Aviation in the winter of 62, in January 62 down in Arizona, I took leave without pay. I went down to work for Intermountain Aviation, and then they were short of pilots. They only had about 4 pilots, and they always wanted somebody to run to Phoenix and back and stuff like that, in the Cessna and things like that. And so I spent about half my time working the loft and working with experimental cargo, and the other half flying for Intermountain. And then I got towards the end of that spring season, before I came back to Missoula to work for Johnson Flying Service. I started getting flying a co-pilot in the larger airplanes.
Larger being?
C-46s and DC-3s and the B-17.
B-17 for retardant drops? Or?
No, B-17, we were in the process of developing a Fulton Skyhook system, which where you want to bring somebody up from the ground rather than drop him in. The guy gets in a suit, inflates a balloon with a long line on it, and B-17 comes in short and snatches that line. The balloon breaks loose, and the guy comes up and wheeling in the airplane.
That's cool. That's the one where the book was written about picking up the scientists off the ice floe. And,
Yeah, I was on that mission.
you were on that mission, Project Coldfeet.
Yeah, that was Coldfeet. And then we went back the following summer and picked up one of the scientists who we went off. They called us up because it was middle of summer, and I was working for Thinner Mountain, and they called us up to go up and pick this guy up because he was really sick. And on the ice pack up there, the ice had broken and melted and stuff where it wasn't safe to land a fixed-wing airplane on it. So and it was way out of range for a helicopter. And so we went up to pick him up. We got as far as Fairbanks, and the guy that was sick up on the ice cap up there, one of the scientists, they told him how he was coming out, and he says, "No, I'm not. No way am I going off that." Well, stayed a couple of days in Fairbanks, had a few beers, and came around went back to our business in Arizona. And then it was about 2 weeks later, I remember had a couple of jumpers, Jerry Daniels and Toby Scott, that I would fly around to various rodeos. They were big rodeo riders, and they never won anything, but they had a lot of fun. And we were over in Silver City, New Mexico, and the loudspeaker come on and said, "Will Bob Nicol please report to the announcer stand?" I said, "What the heck's going on here?" And they said, "They want you back to Miranda now." So we loaded up and flew back to Miranda, and they said, "You guys go and get that scientist." He died.
Oh, so he was a body by then.
Yeah, he was bodied by then, and they had him. The bad thing about it was they had him stretched out on the roof, wrapped in a sleeping bag, to keep the animals away from him. It doesn't make much sense to bury him and they'll dig him up. And his family was apparently pretty influential back in Washington, and they found out what was going on. They said, "I want you to get our son out of there right now for a proper burial." Well, that's what caused the whole mission. And so first thing